Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody, away from the homestead, so you guys are getting me from my hotel room in Atlanta out here checking out a couple of high-profile prospects on the LSU side of things. So wanted to go ahead, though, and record this preview podcast. Didn't want to, skip out on giving you guys the video side of things. So we've got a lot to cover. SMU-Tulsa, Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus, up there in Tulsa. Very difficult place for SMU over the last however many meetings it's been, but since 2009, that was the last time SMU won on the road in Tulsa. They're going up there with, in all likelihood, I don't think we'll get an announcement necessarily before Saturday, an hour or so before kick, but SMU is going to likely start Preston Stone, his first career start as a Mustang, the former four-star quarterback, ran with the ones while Tanner Mordecai was out with his concussion protocol on Tuesday. He was out at practice on Wednesday observing, but Preston Stone got the reps with the ones. Kevin Henry Jennings got the reps with the twos. Looks like SMU is going to roll with Preston Stone, one of the most highly touted prospects to come to campus, especially since the death penalty, hit the program. This is his time to really stake his claim to, to winning the job moving forward. This is his job interview if he's the one that's going to be taking the reins as a starter. And let's assume that he is this week. If he comes out there and plays well, takes care of the football, I don't even know if SMU has to win, but if they do, then Rhett Lashley really has a quarterback decision to make, I think, moving forward. This Tulsa team, 3-4 on the year, same record as SMU, both overall and in league play. They've always been a pesky bunch for the Mustangs. In the 28 games between the two teams, average margin of victory, 9 points, with 17 of those 28 games decided by one score or less. 9 points have separated the two teams through the series history overall. These are also two teams that, quite honestly, aren't that great against the run this year, statistically giving up over 200 yards on the ground. That's something that, look, with SMU's run game, they got a little bit of a boost with Tyler Levine and Kamar Wheaton, but especially Kamar Wheaton, carrying the ball against Cincinnati. If SMU can kind of exploit that, that would be big. On the flip side, Tulsa has not had a 100-yard rusher in 5 games against FBS opponents. That changed last week, though, as Deneric Prince ran for well over 200 yards, including a long, I think, 80-something yard touchdown run against Temple. And look, the Owls are looking like one of the bottom feeders in the AAC, and not at all what we've seen from Temple athletically and all of those things over the past, few years, coming off Matt Rule's time there and things like that. But, now you look at SMU coming off kind of a little bit of a positive, turn in the run game, trajectory against Cincinnati, one of the best defenses in the league that SMU is going to face and any team will face. That kind of gives them a little bit of confidence. I think if they can stick to the run a little bit more, that would be important. Just on the road, you want to be able to take some time off the clock. You want to be able to dictate tempo. The way you can do that is by having a strong run game. I think last week they got away from it at times and it kind of hurt them. But they were also having to, throw the ball a little bit to come back. It is going to be really interesting to see what the offense looks like with Preston Stone at the helm. He went 6 of 15 last week. With the wind, it was kind of dicey for him and Tanner Mordecai at times throwing the football. So the conditions in Tulsa, we'll see kind of what they bring to the table on that front. But I would think this week it's going to be a little bit easier to maybe throw the ball around a little bit. And we'll get an idea of how much are they going to run Preston Stone. That was something that, Casey Woods and Rhett Lashley both kind of talked about, his ability to pick up yards and also just kind of his physical stature They brought up even, looking more like a quarterback that could run, which is interesting. Preston's kind of slimmed down over the course of the offseason from what I saw. I mean, he came back and looked like he had honestly lost some weight or at least toned it up. But whatever the case may be, I think he's going to be a big part of the run game. They like to run him when he's in the game, and he can extend plays. And when Tulsa's defense is going to drop 8 and try to stop you from throwing the football and making explosive plays, that's going to be important. He can pick up yards. He can tuck it and run. And then you maybe have to think about, if you're Tulsa, getting out of some of your base defense, which is being a rush 3, drop 8 type of defense. And it's a really different defense. But on the bright side for SMU, they saw that scheme against TCU, and TCU had some sorts of success at various times against SMU running that scheme. And whether the scheme has the players necessary, like right now TCU is going through that transition or not, TCU has the athletes, certainly, that can make passing windows tighter. And dropping 8 is just really difficult to throw, in. And I mean, that's any opponent. You're dropping 8 for a reason, to really force opponents to take what the defense gives you, potentially look at running the football. But by the way, some of their run fits are kind of different. But this year they haven't had as much success stopping the run. On the flip side of things, Tulsa doesn't get much pressure on the quarterback. They really haven't sacked. I was looking at their top sack getters. No one is over 2 this year. They have really not been able to get after the quarterback. So I would think, if you're SMU, you're going to want a strong ground game, make your first-time starter quarterback comfortable. Not that Preston kind of needs that. I think he has some experience now that you're not necessarily thinking as much about that, because he's played UCF and he's played Cincinnati. But nevertheless, on the road, you want to establish a ground game. You want to be, diverse offensively on the road and not just rely on the pass, because if you're going to do that against a drop 8, it's going to be really difficult. We saw what Maryland did to SMU when they switched to more of a drop 8 look. They had the athletes. They were able to stop SMU and kind of slow them down. So it'll be tough sledding. It's not probably going to be that explosive game from SMU that we've seen, whether it be Tanner or Preston starting and playing, because that's what their defense forces you to do, is to really take what the defense gives you. And Tulsa is one of the best teams in the country slowing down the pass. They rank in the top 10 nationally in pass defense. And I think this is where it's very critical that if you're Preston Stone, you can't press. Not to make a pun, but last week they were playing from behind. You had to take some risks. Threw down the field. That ball that was intercepted, called back on a penalty. Honestly, probably should have ended the game just because of how easy the interception was, but it was a push. You've got to take care of the football. And that's been the key for SMU, is when they take care of the football and they win the turnover battle, that's when they've come away with wins. They've got to do that against Tulsa. For SMU defensively, they're coming off of a building block type of performance, in my opinion. Outside of that long touchdown run that they gave up against Cincinnati, they really played well. Ben Bryant was efficient. SMU didn't force any turnovers, but they really limited, for the most part, explosive plays. They gave up just about 300 total yards of offense if you take away that long touchdown run. So on 76 plays, I think they gave up 303 total yards. And then with 77 plays, they gave up about 380-ish. That's a good performance, against a team that had a lot of skilled players. Tulsa does have Keelan Stokes, the all-time leading receiver at Tulsa. Rhett Lashley mentioned that it seems like he's been there for a decade, which is true. So we're going to see 2 of the best receivers, not only in the AAC, but in the conference, with Rashee Rice back to his full self. I got to be honest, I was very impressed with Rashee. He talked with the reporters on Tuesday, I believe, or Wednesday, one of the two, and just talked about how important it was for him to practice and to get back to practice. And so he's going to be back. I expect him to have a bounce back performance. Again, don't know if he's going to have huge numbers just because of the way this defense, presents itself and limits opportunities to make explosive plays. But He knows how important this game is against Tulsa. He knows what he put out there last week. I'm picking him to be kind of the X factor for SMU offensively. He's got to catch the football from Preston Stone. He's got to make Preston feel comfortable because Jordan Curley, very questionable this week. I'm not so sure he's going to play. That'll be a tough blow if SMU is without Jordan Curley. He made a play last week for SMU against Cincinnati. Then you've got to look at Moochie Dixon, who stepped up, Austin Upshaw, guys like that who've kind of been coming on a little bit lately. Look, I think defensively, what's been so key is this defensive line. They have stepped up. They've got athletes in that bunch. We talked about it early in the year when SMU was giving up big chunks of yardage. They were missing Stephon Wright. They were missing Mike Johan Sanjo Njiki. They had some of their edge rushers. Jalen Samuels, Nelson Paul were banged up. Isaiah Smith was just a freshman, just starting out. Last week against Cincinnati, you saw what this SMU defensive line could be if they're healthy, which they are, and they have that type of depth. Very important. SMU did a really good job rotating against Cincinnati, getting guys in there early and often. And Scott Simons even talked about it, how it was important for them to rotate guys and to get them into the flow of the game. And guys are practicing better because they're understanding the defense. And because of that, they're playing with a little bit more confidence. So they're more likely to give those guys opportunities to play because of that. This defensive staff, especially from what I've taken away as they've installed this defense, because offensively you kind of knew what SMU was going to do, and some of the guys have been there. Defensively, it's all brand new. And you're setting a new culture after a horrific experiment on defense last year. It's so important for them to get that culture right, and the culture of practicing hard, producing in practice. I mean, Sam Westfall been around a long time, and he was a starter at corner to start this year, and it's because of the way he practiced. Now, I think as some of these other guys are starting to step up a little bit, we're seeing a little bit of rotation now and start to kind of adjust that because they are having to weigh that out, right? But they can do that because a lot of these guys are understanding what these coaches want out of them in practice, and they're producing. We've seen Shannon Reed play more. We've seen Cam Farrar play more. Jaquandis Burns even getting more burn. Kiki Burns is now carved out a role for himself in this defense. And that's not to mention Jimmy Phillips and Isaac Slade-Matutia stepping up. But it all starts with that defensive line. Rotating those guys, allowing them to get in the flow of the game early on. We saw DeVere Levelston step up. When you have DeVere and Stephon Wright out there at the same time, and then you have a Nelson Paul and an Isaiah Smith, Jalen Samuels, Jaden Jones, those guys off the edge, that's a different looking defense than I think we've seen. And it's kind of more of what when you envisioned, and honestly, I think if you go back and you look at some of the depth chart projections that I kind of had, and then what it ended up being and what it's kind of looked like, some of the ones from the spring and the summer before we got into fall camp, and it kind of they moved some guys around, they tweaked things. But now that they've kind of found the right mix, it's kind of looking like some of those projections from the summer, which I kind of think is funny and just kind of a coincidence. But you have Elijah Chapman in the middle, you have Terrence Newman in the middle, you have Mike Johan Sanjiki in the middle. Those guys play really, really hard. And then you're able to get a DeVere Levelston and a Stephon Wright on the other side of them. That's helping. And the pass rush is really able to get some things done because Stephon Wright and DeVere Levelston are super athletic. So you can run a stunt. Scott Simons mentioned Calvin Thibodeau having a great call on one of those sacks of Ben Bryant. This defense is just starting to kind of put pieces together. It's not perfect, but you're starting to see them inch up more into the middle of the pack in yards allowed, and inch up in terms of yards per play and yards per completion. They're getting better on things like that, which is a nice positive trend as of late. We talked about how the 4 losses have been to teams that I think have a combined 6 losses on the season, which is just insane. So you would expect as they get into this kind of back half of the schedule, they're going to have some opportunities to play teams that just aren't as good. Whether SMU goes undefeated down the stretch, loses 1, loses 2, loses all of them, these teams are not as good as the 4 losses that SMU has on its resume, and that's, in my opinion, just fact. So you're expecting them to kind of take a little bit of a jump up, and not only because maybe level of competition goes down a little bit, but because they are more comfortable. And you're seeing that. And Scott Simon specifically talked about, and Shannon Reed had a bad read. This is an unreal podcast for puns today, but had kind of a bad read, a little bit slow on that third down conversion that Cincinnati picked up to end the game. But he's out there because he overall played a really good game. Scott Simon singled him out as somebody he thought he played really, really well and had, quite the performance. So, you can't execute perfectly on every play, but this team is just starting to kind of figure it out and figure out what the expectation level is defensively, and they're putting it together. So I'm interested to see kind of down the stretch how it pans out. One thing of note in the secondary, we've seen a little bit more of Ahmad Moses here and there lately. So that's something to watch. I think as he kind of puts the pieces together, you could kind of see him maybe start to really steal some snaps from Roger Roberson and kind of, change that there. You have Brandon Crosby, Brian Massey, and Nick Roberts for the most part, but Ahmad Moses is going to have a really bright future at SMU, in my opinion. And, part of that is, just him being able to make plays and be in the right spot. And so he's doing that early on. Tulsa, Deneric Prince, really impressive rushing performance last week. I mentioned against Temple. He really hadn't done much, before that. And in terms of Tulsa, it's kind of because they rotate 5 running backs, but this offensive line has not been good at all for Tulsa all year. Was reading up on them and watched a little bit of that Temple game back. And, they've allowed, I think, something like 20 sacks in the last 4 games. So I think SMU's pass rush, and especially if they can get home with 4 guys or 3 guys getting after Davis Brin, that'll help. Davis Brin been around a while, but you're facing an SMU defensive line and defense that has 40 tackles for loss on the season, 15 sacks, and 14 quarterback hurries. That's pretty good. And considering Tulsa's offensive line has allowed 49 tackles for loss and 30 sacks on the year, if SMU can kind of impose their will early on, and that's why I picked this one to be a little bit more of a low-scoring game when you look at it, that could really kind of change things a little bit for this matchup in terms of how it trends. Now, I'll say this. Whenever you're trying to get a monkey off your back, it's really hard. And it's a war, and it's a fight to the very finish. And that's why I'll go ahead and give you guys my pick. I picked SMU to win 27-17. I think, though, it's going to be more of a, SMU probably be up 20-17, and you get a late touchdown that puts the game on ice. SMU finishes really well in this one, I think. I think that when you look at, and some people brought up the strength and conditioning staff, I actually feel like SMU has played really well kind of later in games outside of the UCF when things spiraled. But you look at the way they're able to battle to the end, that shows that I think the strength and conditioning, with where it's at is working and in a positive spot. So I'm going to pick SMU 27-17 over Tulsa. I'm usually a show me guy. I just have a feeling about this one that SMU is going to be able to go up there and get the win. I guess I probably should pick it. SMU 26, Tulsa 17, something weird like, a 9-point win, since it's usually one score type of game, or 8-point win or something like that. But Tulsa has, had its moments where it's played teams pretty tough, but they've also had some moments where they just look kind of inept offensively. And it's because, like we talked about, they can't protect Davis Brin. I think when you have a rotation that is that deep at running back, they're probably not as consistent as they like them to be. Now, they're probably going to give SMU a heavy dose of Deneric Prince. After the game he had, he certainly earned it. SMU is 2.5-point favorites at the time. And at the time of this podcast, I feel like that's probably fair. I think SMU, when you look at it, they played tougher teams. They've had a tough schedule, and they played most of those teams tough throughout. Tulsa always puts up a fight in this one. And trust me, I'm a little worried about my pick, but I do think that they're going to be able to put it together. And part of it is because of how well the pass rush did against Cincinnati last week. If they can slow the run down, Tulsa also has Steven Anderson. That will help. This is a really difficult game to kind of predict because weird things just kind of tend to happen in this series. Tulsa's won 5 of the last 7, and I think they've won 2 straight as well. So SMU looking to avoid losing 3 straight to Tulsa in this one. We are going to have all your coverage on theponyexpress.com, so be sure to check it out. I've got SMU winning 27-17, so 10-point win for the Mustangs. We'll see. That's kind of a stretch, I think, but when you look at the 2 offenses, I think SMU is going to find enough ways to score. Rhett Lashley did have success against Tulsa in that 2019 game. If I have my games right, which I'll look up right now as we're talking about it, but they had a good bit of success against Tulsa in 2019, and I feel like that's going to help. I think it's such a difficult defense to call a game against. Yeah, SMU put up 43 points, 143-37 in Dallas in 2019. So Rhett Lashley has experience going against this defense. I think that's going to help in a big way. I like what they're doing offensively. I mean, there's been very few teams that can truly slow SMU down. They did not have a great day at all against Cincinnati. That wind, that quarterback change, it just wasn't that good. And this is kind of in part why I think they'll bounce back too. They're close. It's kind of feels like that Navy game, except there hasn't been three straight losses to teams. SMU loses a tough one against Cincinnati. They're ticked. They want to get over this Tulsa hump on the road. I think they'll come out and play really, really hard. I don't think the homecoming thing is big for Tulsa emotionally, but I do feel like SMU is also going to bring it on this road game. I like the way SMU has come out in the 2 road games they've had, two in their 2 losses on the road. They came out really well against Maryland. They just didn't, get much to show for it against Maryland or UCF on the road early on. I don't think this SMU team doesn't feel like a bad road team. They're reflective of what they've done all year, which is just not capitalize on all their opportunities. I mean, all the teams SMU has lost to, they did not capitalize on their opportunities to win those games, whether it be home or away. So I feel like going on the road, SMU has been fairly good at starting fast. And so I'll give them a little bit of credit in that. And if they can do that against Tulsa and kind of get up on them early, get some confidence, close this one out. I know there's been leads in this series that have been big, kind of insurmountable ones. The 2019 lead for Tulsa, of course, comes to mind, which was crazy. That overtime game when James Prochet came back. Tulsa coming back against SMU in 2020 and 2021. But I just feel like if SMU can get out ahead of this one kind of feels a little different because if Tulsa has to pass to come back, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to come back from, down. So with that, guys, going to kind of quickly move on. SMU does open up its basketball season as well this weekend. They play Paul Quinn Saturday night in Moody Coliseum as well. It is an exhibition game Saturday at 7 p.m. Central. It will be broadcast, it sounds like, on the SMU app. So check that out if you can. We're going to try to have coverage of that one. Just kind of depends on schedule and how the SMU-Tulsa game goes. But that's just for you guys. SMU app is what it sounds like you're going to watch it on. I don't see any TV listed or anything like that, but I'm trying to pull it up now as well. It's the debut of the Rob Lanier era at SMU. I guess, I mean, I don't know if you call it the debut or if you have it, if you have to wait until the actual regular season or what, but nevertheless, SMU takes on Paul Quinn College on Saturday at 7 p.m. Central. I'm excited to see, just the guys get back out there. New team. You've got the returners, Zach Nuttall, Frank Aguane, Darius McBride, Zurich Phelps, Jalen Smith, and Stefan Todorovic, who have all played various roles for SMU over the last, really, I guess all of them have only, outside of Darius McBride, have been there 1 year. So going to be really interested to see how those guys, especially Zach and Zurich, have developed. Jalen Smith is kind of a dark horse for me to really have a big role on this team and make some plays. He'll be more comfortable in year 2. He made 8 starts last year, got his feet wet, and is super athletic and plays really hard on defense. So I'm very interested to see how those guys look. As far as the newcomers, you've got Keon Ambrose Hilton, Xavier Foster, or Keon is a forward, Xavier Foster, big man, 7-footer, Jefferson Koulibaly, a guard, kind of a point guard. Emery Lanier is a walk-on guard, transferred in from Davidson. He's Rob Lanier's son. Mo Ng, 6'10", big man. F.A. Odigi, 6'9", 240-pounder from Troy. Samuel Williamson, transfer, former 5-star prospect that went to Louisville. And then Ricardo Wright, another guard, comes over from Marist, kind of a point guard. And then that's kind of it as far as the scholarship guys. So, I think for SMU, it's about getting guys' feet wet against somebody else. We all know how tough it was to get information out of that Oklahoma State scrimmage. And I just think this team's going to be very different from what they're asked of. First of all, we know SMU heavily relied upon, the offensive scoring for Tim Jankovic, not as much about, defense. Rob Lanier is very different. He wants defense, rebounding, pick you up, full court press, all of those things, take smart shots, and get high percentage looks. So I'm interested to see what the night and day, how night and day it looks in game 1. Obviously, I think SMU will overmatch them and certainly come away with a win. And then we'll have, some things to take away from that game, some things to talk about before they really get underway with their season. For SMU, I think you want to get as many guys in and see what they do in the game, because right now it's all based on, practice, how guys perform in practice, but definitely their effort level. Rob Lanier needs to change the culture. And so a lot of that has been how hard these guys play in practice. So I think the rotation could look a little odd at first, but it'll settle in as we get going here. I just feel like this is such a night and day team. It's almost hard to predict what this is going to look like. But the good thing is we'll have tons to talk about Saturday night into Sunday, and kind of have some takeaways on the basketball front, which will be good. I'm excited to see it. Hope you guys are as well. Going to close out this edition of the podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys do get to listen to it before the game, maybe running around errands Saturday morning, or trying to have it up by the time you make your commute home on Friday as well. So with that, going to close this out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing to ontheponyexpress.com, as well as subscribing to our YouTube page. Continues to grow. So thank you guys so much for subscribing to that. And also wherever you guys listen to us, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or Google or Apple, we appreciate you guys listening. Going to be a lot to cover this weekend. Football and basketball season. It's about to get crazy busy here on the Pony Express. Don't miss out. Try us free for 7 days. We still have Founders Club hats available, so be sure to pick one of those up with a subscription. And with that, guys, we'll shut this one down. Hope you guys have a great weekend and enjoy the hoops and the football. We'll catch you next week.